Good morning. I'm Pastor Trevor, our teaching pastor here at Coastal. Excited to be with you. The past 40 days for the prayer has been just fantastic. Even if you missed out on the first 40 days, want to hop in, grab the book. Great time to just, any time's a good time to focus on prayer. So feel free to hop in on that. And then counter to this Tuesday, not tomorrow. I hear rumblings of snow, but it's just rumblings. You never know. The forecast will change 15 times between now and Tuesday. But hopefully we'll be back for Encounter. So we're continuing in our in our value series, and Pastor Brett and I are going to talk about generations. But just as kind of a quick note for you, I have a picture here that I took on the side of the road in Hawaii. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm leaning over the guardrail taking that picture. And I think all of us have been on a road trip where, you're like, ooh, check out this sunset or an overlook, or maybe you just pull off on the side of the road and you just kind of take it in for just a minute. Well, that's really what we're doing here with our values series at Coastal. There are different things that make us a church, things that are important to us, those moments that we have something that we just want to kind of take in for a minute, and then we're going to hop back in the car and head on the road on the superhighway, moving on to the next one. So today we're going to talk about generations. And when we talk of generations here at Coastal, we want to talk about youthful passion with seasoned wisdom, and how those match together for generations and generations to come. And so when we look in Scripture, there's a whole bunch of different ways where we see youthful passion, where we see the moments where the heart of somebody, their faith is just kind of passionate and just so excitable. And Jesus himself even talks about youthfulness a little bit in a couple spots. One in particular in Matthew 18. In verse 3, it says, I tell you the truth. Unless you turn from your sins and become like little children, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. So anyone who becomes as humble as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, in this moment, Jesus' disciples, they're having a debate on which one of them is going to be the greatest. And Jesus knows this, and so he takes a little kid and says, look, you guys are missing the point here. There's a simplicity that happens in this youth, in this child, just their belief, their humility. Because let's call it what it is. As adults, we tend to keep things complicated sometimes. We make things a little more complex than what they need to be. But at the same time, we know life is messy. Life is busy, and our culture causes things to be difficult. And so there's a beauty that Jesus is pointing out of the simplicity of the belief of a little child, and that there's something to gain from that. But as all of us know, we can't always operate and think like kids. Paul, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 13 spoke to this a little bit. Probably many of you, if you're married, had this read at your wedding. This is like the verse that most people have, the love chapter that read. And in verse 11, it says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put childish ways, maybe those are synonyms, I put childish ways behind me. And so Paul is really trying to say, hey, look, as kids, we have these ideas. We have this simple belief, but at the same time, we have these words, these reasonings that we have that really we got to put that behind us. We got to move on and make better decisions. To give you one quick example from the Hill household. When my daughter was in 6th grade, she read an article in class from one of the little magazines they had there about this group of girls that were about her age, and one of their friends got cancer. And so since this child was going through chemo, 8, 10 of them, they all decided all these girls would shave their heads together, like camaraderie. I was like, yeah, okay. My daughter came downstairs and said, Dad, I want to shave my head bald. Okay, wow, yeah, sure. I love that you read that article and that you're moved by that, but honey, do you know anybody that has cancer? Well, no, but kids do. Yes, but you're getting ready to go into middle school. And let's call it what it is. Middle school girls, 12 to 14 hormonal teenagers, they're not the kindest of people with regard to their opinions. And you're going to purposely shave your head and yes, I want to do it. I think it'll be great. This went on for an hour of us debating. Finally, her teacher that she had said, oh, that's so sweet. Don't shave your head, please. Thankfully, at least the teacher brought some insight, some wisdom into this. It was a great idea in her mind, but really, it's kind of what Paul's talking about here. It's a childish ways that need to be moved behind her. Now, I did get permission from Tirza. She's down serving in Chrisfield this morning to tell the story. When we talked about it, she was like, wow, that's crazy, Dad. What was I thinking? That was such a childish idea. But here as a church, we love youthful passion. We love it when people get excited about something, when God stirs up something inside of them that God is pushing them and wanting them to do. And to have an outlet here as a part of our church family, to be a part of doing that and getting excited, like that's something that we value as a church. Another example of youthful passion we see in 1 Samuel 17. This is with not yet King David, a famous character, of course, from the Old Testament. In chapter 16, he has just been anointed by Samuel. So he's going to be the future king. He's not there yet. And then at the end of that chapter, he goes into the service of the current king to play the harp. This is one of those where the king would get really angry, and the only thing that soothed him was David playing the harp to calm him down. And then at the beginning of chapter 17, which we're going to look at here in a second, he went back to being a shepherd, and there was also his dad's errand boy. The Israelites were at war with the Philistines then in a famous battle that you've probably heard of with Goliath and David. And the only way that they could get supplies to them, they didn't have like a kitchen that traveled with them. They didn't have the MRE kits, the meal-ready kits like our military does. You would have friends and family that would come from the house with the things you needed and bring them to you. And so that was David's role. So as David comes upon the army, bringing his brothers some cheese and some other things, he hears Goliath and finds out for 40 days down in the valley, Goliath has just been slamming on God's army. He's been taunting the Israel's army. And so David comes to the king and says, all right, in verse 32 of chapter 17, don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go and fight him. And the reason that he was going to fight him, just as a quick point of order, Goliath said, hey, you send down your top fighter, I will fight, and whoever wins, that's who wins the battle. So David's offering to go. David told Saul, and then Saul says, don't be ridiculous. There is no way you can fight this Philistine to possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal the lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue it from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I simply catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I'm talking about lions and bears here. I've done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. David had such passion about this, such passion about going into this battle. Now, granted, at the same time, he had some limited but pretty legitimate experience to back that up. And so Saul in this, he didn't completely shut him down. As he saw his heart, as he saw the direction he's going, as he saw the reasoning behind it, he didn't stop him, but instead, he provided some direction. He provided some empowerment for him on his way. And that's what we want to do as a church. We want to give direction. We want to give empowerment to these youthful passions, this excitement that people have. God has called them to do something. We want to empower them to go and do it. So instead of me coming to tears and saying, hey, kid, here's shaving cream and a straight edge, go do it. Instead, some of our conversation turned to, well, maybe you could, send some letters to them. Maybe you could raise a little money, lemonade stand or something, and you could donate that money. Maybe even just, take some gifts and send them something for those kids that are in the cancer ward, something to lift their spirits. Finding a way to direct what her heart was in it in a good place. I think. I mean, she was a sixth grade girl. They sometimes their thinking is very different than ours, and that's okay. We love them anyway. But her heart was in a good spot, so trying to redirect that. David's noting that God protected him from the bear and the lion, and he's going to do it again. So King Saul turns around and says, you know what? Here's my armor. Take and put on the armor and go and fight Goliath. He's trying to empower David to do it. Now, you've probably heard David and Goliath preached a number of times, and there is a lot of meat on the bone, which we're going to have to, unfortunately, leave there for another day. But understand that David, even though he was young, he had a belief in what God could do because of what he had seen God already do in his life. And at Coastal Community, we value generations. We value youthful passion. I don't mind telling you, Pastor Brett, If any of you worked with Pastor Brett for any amount of time, this dude just like oozes youthful passion. From working here on campus and some stuff I've helped with CY to prepping sermons, working around. And when we went on a trip to Guatemala on a mission trip last summer, I can't tell you how many times I'm talking with Pastor Brett about an idea and he almost interrupts because he's so excited about it. Like, it's not him being rude. He's like, oh, 100%. Oh yeah, let's do that. Like, he is the model of youthful passion just because he gets so excited about stuff because God is just stirring up something in him. But understand, youthful passion is not limited to your age. It's not something that we as a church or even in general that we talk generations because we have to work on the kids that haven't made it out of high school or are still in diapers. I mean, yes, absolutely that's a part of it. But there are some of you that you've had a youthful passion stir up in you. Maybe it is that you retired. Maybe it is suddenly now you don't have that 9 to 5 and you're like, I now have margin in my schedule. And God starts to stir up something in you for missions. God starts to stir up something in you about serving and giving back of this time, gifts, and talents that you've had that you've had to be in the grind to live and pay bills. That's kind of important. And so now suddenly there's this youthful passion that even though you are not a youth, God stirred something inside of you. Time and time again, I'm not in this stage of life, but I've seen it on the outside. We'll have grandparents that, all of a sudden there's these little cute children that you get to play with and then hand back to the parents when they're really noisy. But God stirs up something inside of you that you're like, you know what? I want to make sure that the next generation, that kids, that there's something I want to give of my time. Like, God stirs up a youthful passion in you. We have lots of adults that they get into a community group and God stirs something up in them. Or they recognize, I want to be a better disciple. I need to get into follow. Or I need to serve. It's not an age restriction. We've talked about the new building that we want to do and the vision that we have for that and the impact that'll have on not only the older generations, but the younger generations and everywhere. These God-sized dreams, these God-sized ideas, because that's what it is. I would argue that youthful passion is usually the driver for those God-sized dreams for us to accomplish, something that's beyond us, that we look and we're like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's go for it. Let's go after it. It's one of those times where when we start imagining what God could do because of what we've already seen God do in our life. And so as a church, we want to support that. We want to encourage that. We want to help us find ways that we can make that even more by giving it direction and empowerment. But in order to do that, in order to help this youthful passion become what it can be, we need some seasoned wisdom. And so for that, I invite Pastor Brett to the stage. Let's give him a hand for Pastor Brett. Thank you.
See, at this point in my life, I had made the decision to give everything to Jesus. All that it was, I was ready to go all in, and I went crazy telling anyone about who he was. My friends, strangers, anyone who would even give me the light of day to listen. See, I was hosting FaceTime Bible studies, giving homeless people rides just for the chance to share the gospel. I was inviting my whole entire football team to church, and my coach was like, this kid is crazy, because he saw from one year a kid who's getting ejected, fighting, whatever, to inviting kids to youth group, to church. It was crazy. See, I wanted my entire school to know him. I was passionate, I was driven, and I was ready to change the Eastern Shore. But there's one issue. I didn't really know how to follow Jesus yet. I knew the basics. I knew that Jesus had died for me. I knew the core gospel message. But I didn't understand things like what spiritual disciplines were, like resting, community, reading your Bible, all those things. I didn't know how to grow really in my faith yet. In fact, there's this funny story where me and Pastor Ryan are reading the Bible before CY one day. We're reading 1 Peter, and he's got his Bible, I have mine. And so I'm reading out loud, and like I said, he has his Bible. And he's like, what he's saying is not adding up with what's on this book. I was reading the footnotes. I wasn't actually reading the Bible. I was reading the commentary explaining the words. See, I didn't even know where to start my Bible. See, I needed direction and I needed wisdom. And God knew I needed seasoned wisdom. He surrounded me with it. I was blessed to have just a plethora of guys as soon as I got saved, just to help guide me and give me the direction that I desperately needed. See, these kinds of relationships, they remind me of the one between Paul and Timothy. Paul is this guy in the Bible. He's probably, at this point, is one of the greatest missionaries of all time. I mean, he's an apostle. He had this awesome story where he met Jesus on the way to Damascus, on the way to kill Christians, on his way to Damascus, and had this amazing encounter with the Lord. See, Paul ended up writing 2/3 of the Bible. Paul is just this seasoned follower of Jesus. And Timothy was this young man. He was green. He was a young pastor in a church in Ephesus. See, Paul recognized that Timothy needed wisdom. Paul says at one point in his letter that he's being poured out like a drink offering, and that he's finished the race, that his time has come. It's his turn just to pour out into Timothy. So what I want to do today is I want to take a closer look at this relationship. I want to see where seasoned wisdom shows up. First is this. Seasoned wisdom establishes a relationship. See, Paul begins his letter to Timothy by calling him my true son in the faith. And this wasn't just a title. It was a reflection of the deep, authentic relationship that they had. And Paul didn't just see Timothy as a mentee or someone to teach. He loved him. He loved him like family. And relationships like that are the foundation for influence. There's a funny story. Does anyone remember Pastor Dan? He's a big bald guy. Yeah. Pastor Dan was awesome. Pastor Dan is one of my favorite people. Pastor Dan was my youth pastor. And I have this really cool story about him is one time I was playing a high school football game and I could hear and see Pastor Dan in the stands. That meant everything to me. Everything. See, to have a guy like that, see, he was my youth pastor, but I always kind of saw myself as someone in the congregation, not an individual. Pastor Dan took time out of his day. That wasn't his work day. It was probably like 6:30, 6:45, 2-hour game, stayed for the whole game. Didn't stay for just a social media picture, whatever. He was there for me. And that changed, that little thing changed the direction of my life, probably. See, those little things can do things as big as that. When we want to influence youthful passion, it starts by building trust through genuine love and care. Without relationship, we're not going to get very far of seasoned wisdom. Seasoned wisdom is kind of stay to ourselves. Relationship is that vessel to give seasoned wisdom. Second, seasoned wisdom teaches through past experiences. In 2 Timothy chapter 3:10, Paul reminds Timothy, you, however, know all about my teaching, my way of life, my purpose, faith, patience, love, and endurance. Paul isn't telling Timothy what to do. He's saying, hey, look at me. This is what I am. I've modeled this. These are my experiences. He's teaching Timothy through his experiences. And this reminds me of a story about my dad. My dad is probably the hardest working man I know. One day, so my dad's a contractor for FedEx, and one day he's delivering a box. And he steps out and boom, hit by a car. And the car, he breaks his leg, he rolls onto the windshield, and you would think a normal man would go to the hospital. My dad finished his job. He finished delivering the rest of his boxes he had. And then the funny story is when my dad finally went to the hospital, was the people who were in the car were at the hospital before he was. So when my dad taught me about hard work, I could not argue with him. I had no basis. See, I saw it from my dad. So when hard work was the subject, I was like, oh, this man lives it. I have to as well. See, our experiences, both failures and victories, are valuable tools for teaching the next generation. They don't just need our advice. They need our stories. They need our experiences. They need our examples. Third is this, a seasoned wisdom encourages. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, Paul tells Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech and conduct and love and faith and in purity. See, Paul recognized something about youthful passion. It can be fragile. While it might seem confident and bold on the outside, it often masks itself as insecurity or doubt. And I know this. I can relate to this in a way. When I was younger, and now, my passion for Jesus sometimes came off as arrogance. I acted like I had it all figured out, but the truth was, and this goes for everyone kind of that acts in this youthful passion, we don't. A lot of us are young, we haven't had these experiences, and we know that. So what we do is to mask that, we puff up our chest and act arrogant, act like we know it all. See, the best way to remedy this is encouragement. And that's hard. The last thing you want to do when some punk kid comes up to you and acts like he knows it all is encourage him, right? That's hard, but I'm telling you that is the best remedy. That is the solution to this insecurity. Encouragement has the power to unlock the full potential of youthful passion. At our church, at Coastal, we value generations. Generations is a big part of who we are. Like we said, it's one of our 7 values. We value youthful passion mixed with seasoned wisdom. And I just want you to picture this with me. Imagine if we became a church that was so about this, that embodied this, that where people would come in with youthful passion, would meet with seasoned wisdom, and we would just change the world. It's a big deal. Imagine everyone had a mentor or a mentee. See, we believe God stirs youthful passion to ignite change. But we also know that passion needs a direction and empowerment that only seasoned wisdom can provide. So here's my challenge to you. If you're young and passionate, find someone with seasoned wisdom to guide you. And I want you to think about that right now. If you can just picture in your brain, who is someone you can talk to that has seasoned wisdom? You can say, hey, maybe, can we get lunch once a month? Once a week, maybe? I just want to learn from you. Or if you've been walking with God for years, invest in the next generation. Build relationships, share your experiences, and encourage them. Find that one person, like I said with youthful passion, seasoned wisdom, and vice versa. Find that person that's in your life that you're like, I want to pour into this person. Find it, think about it. If you don't know where to start, here's some other ways you can. Take a next step today. Start follow. Get a booklet, pair up with a spiritual coach, and start growing. Over there in the information desk are these first steps booklets for Follow. And Follow, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is this comprehensive discipleship plan we have here at Coastal. It's a 8-week process, or it could be longer, but it's meant to be an 8-week process where you go through 7 attributes of a follower of Jesus. It's a really great book. I've been through it. A lot of you have probably been through it. And so pair up with a coach. Take that first steps booklet. Try to pair with someone. I guarantee you, you will not regret it. Next is you can join Coastal Youth or Coastal Kids if you're looking to serve. I'm always looking for volunteers on the youth staff. Miss Ruth Ann's always looking for volunteers on the kids staff. We are asking. There's always places. Join CY or Coastal Kids, connect with others, and pour into the young people of this church. Or you can start serving. There are so many ways to serve here. In fact, we're going to have a Serve Fest coming up in the coming weeks where you can learn all about ways to serve, like hospitality, security, production team, worship, youth or kids, like I said, hospitality. There's so many ways that this happens here. So in a few minutes, I'm going to pray, or a few seconds, I'm going to pray. And if you would like prayer today, it'd be awesome. If you're part of the prayer team, if you could come up and just be there, be available. See, youthful passion and seasoned wisdom together can change the world. So what I want you to do is think of that person you thought of. Who's that person you can pour into, or someone you like to pour into you? That person of seasoned wisdom, or that person with youthful passion. And do it. And do it. If you guys would stand with me, I would just like to pray. Let's build something that lasts for generations. Lord, we love you. Use us, God. We are your servants. You're your servants, God. Teach us to serve. Father, give us the boldness just to step out and ask for that lunch, ask for that dinner, ask for that relationship to start. God, Father, give us names in our head right now of people that we can ask to. And like Pastor Trevor said, God, that we can be young and we can be old. It doesn't matter. Use us, Father. Give us the boldness. Lord, I thank you for everyone here today, what you've done in their lives. In fact, just to bring them here on a church on a Sunday morning. God, here to worship you and learn about you and learn how to follow you deeper. Father, I thank you. Say all these things in your name. Amen. Have a good week, church.